Hello. Today I'm going to be reading the next chapter in The Clue in the Crumbling Wall from the Nancy Drew series. I am going to be reading chapter 8, which is titled, No Trespassers Allowed. Nancy and her father were up early the next morning. Without troubling Mrs. Gruen, they hastily made breakfast and drove to the damaged button factory. The last half mile was not easy riding, for the road, like everything else on the Heath property, was in bad condition. "I see why those men came by boat," said Mr. Drew, finally stopping the car some distance from the building. "This road is pretty hard on tires. We'll walk from here." Nancy led the way through the dew-laden grass to the scene of the explosion. There was no sign of anyone near the factory. The only sound to be heard was the wild cry of a huge waterfowl which rose from the marsh. "Those two fellows did a good job of destruction," commented the lawyer as the Drews cautiously entered the building. "Here's where the wall caved in near George and me," Nancy explained, kicking at the debris with her foot. "Looks as if it might have been dynamited," her father remarked after gazing about carefully. "Let's see if we can find any telltale evidence." For the next half hour, father and daughter scrambled in and out of the rubble. Discovering nothing of importance in the corridor, they decided to investigate the large workroom at the back. It was necessary for them to go outside and climb in through a window to reach the room because the inside doorway to it was blocked. "Oh, it's like a ghost town," said Nancy as she surveyed the rusted machinery and layers of dust. "To think that this was once a prosperous factory." "It isn't much of a tribute to the Heaths, I'll admit," commented Mr. Drew. "What was this machine used for?" Nancy asked, interested in a steel saw attached to it. "This is for cutting," her father explained, pausing beside it. "The clamshell is placed in the machine. An operator moves a lever and down comes the circular steel saw. Presto! A little shell disc drops into the hopper. Another machine slices the disc into pieces of uniform thickness, and there you have some buttons." "How clever," said Nancy. "The buttons pass through still another machine which polishes them," Mr. Drew went on. "In the last operation, thread holes are drilled through them." "To think all this was done right here in River Heights and I never knew anything about it," Nancy said in wonder. Mr. Drew turned away. "I guess there's nothing more to learn, Nancy, either about the buttons or the mystery of the factory. If those men deliberately caused the explosion, they skillfully covered their work. We may as well leave before we're accused of trespassing." Bitterly disappointed, Nancy was just about to let her father help her through the window when her sharp eyes caught sight of something. "Dad, look!" she cried. Sticking out from a corner of the rubble in the doorway lay a scrap of paper, and near it were several freshly made footprints. Nancy darted toward them and picked up the paper. A glance sufficed to show her that the words on it might have value. The sheet had been torn in such a way that only part of the message was there. It was written in a man's hand and read, "Dear C, some cret which I, in a wall, famous, worthy." I'm just going to show you what the message looks like there on the page. Nancy showed her father what she had found. "Interesting," he commented, scanning the torn paper, "but I can't say that it makes much sense. The footprints might be a better clue." He stooped to examine them. "Freshly made, without a doubt," he said. "Evidently your two strangers have visited here since the explosion." "Then that practically proves they're searching for something," Nancy concluded. "Something that they think was hidden and could be found only by blasting it out." "If that's true, I'm sure it had nothing to do with Floriana," said Mr. Drew. "Maybe not," Nancy sighed. She was staring at the torn note. "I believe I've stumbled on a worthwhile clue just the same," she said slowly. "I can guess now that one of these words is secret." She pocketed the message and reluctantly left the factory with her father, who had an appointment at his office and already was late. At home again, she spent more than an hour trying to piece together the missing words of the note. Who had written them? The paper appeared old, the ink slightly faded. It wouldn't surprise me if Walter Heath wrote the message, she said to Hannah Gruen. No way to prove it, though. I know how you might find out, was the housekeeper's surprising answer. How? Walter Heath was a member of the River Heights Historical Society before his death. Isn't it likely the society would have specimens of his handwriting? Hannah Gruen, you're a genius! Nancy cried, giving the woman a hug. I'm off to the Historical Society building this very minute. Luck was with her. On many of the books and pieces of furniture which Walter Heath had given to the museum, she found not one, but several samples of the deceased estate owner's handwriting. It's the same as that in the note, Nancy decided excitedly, comparing the script. Now, if only I can find the missing half of the note. Many questions plagued the girl. Had the torn sheet fallen from some niche in the wall at the time of the explosion? Or had one of the strangers dropped it when leaving the ruins? Hector Keep may have the other part, Nancy speculated. If so, I'm afraid I'll never see it. Seeking her father's aid once more, Nancy asked him to talk to the lawyer and try to get what information he could from him about the Heath case. Again, she was to be disappointed. Mr. Keep came honestly by his name, Carson Drew reported somewhat later to his daughter. He certainly kept his secrets from me. Didn't he tell you anything? Nancy asked. Nothing worth mentioning. As soon as I spoke of Heath Castle and the button factory, he closed up as tight as one of Hardy's clams. Did you mention Floriana's name? Yes. Hector Keep stressed that he was still searching diligently for her. I wonder, said Nancy softly. The Heath Castle mystery was no nearer a solution than before. Eager as the girl was to revisit the castle, she found it impossible because her father had made her promise not to go there, alone, and none of her friends would be free to accompany her until the next day. I know what I'll do, she thought enthusiastically. Go over the whole Heath property by plane. It's nice that she has the ability to just do that. And how old is Nancy Drew? For some time, Nancy had been taking flying lessons whenever it was possible. For some time. Wow. She had not soloed yet, but hoped to do so very soon. Telephoning to her instructor, she made an appointment. I wondered when I was going to hear from you again, the young man said as the two climbed into his plane. Have you been busy solving a new mystery? There's a new mystery bothering me right now, laughed Nancy. How to work all these gadgets. Despite her words, she started the motor and headed the plane into the wind as if she were a seasoned pilot. Reaching sufficient altitude, she banked and headed in the direction of Heath Castle. When I get home, I'll map the area, she thought, making careful mental notes as she flew over the estate. At least I have a good idea now where the castle is situated. Nancy circled the area several times. Satisfied that she could jot down a general plan of the place, she started to leave. Suddenly, the girl noticed a cloud of smoke in the vicinity of the castle. Curious, she banked the plane and flew back over the castle. The smoke was rising in a mass, but Nancy could not make out its exact origin because the foliage was so dense. Someone is on the estate anyway, she mused. Oh dear, I hope the fire won't do any damage. The plane nosed downward, reminding the girl that she must pay close attention to her piloting. For the first time, her instructor spoke to her. With a hasty glance at the altimeter, she climbed to a safe height and returned home to make a perfect landing. Wow. You're doing better every day, the young man praised her as they climbed out. At this rate, you'll soon solo. I hope so, grinned Nancy. I think every girl should learn to fly. I agree. What do you hear from Ned Nickerson? The instructor inquired. Ned Nickerson? Nancy tried to act unconcerned, but she blushed becomingly. Why, I had a letter from him yesterday. He's in South America. Miss him, don't you? Yes, I do, Nancy said truthfully. Ned and I had wonderful times together. He hopes to get home soon. Won't he be surprised when he finds out about my flying? Keep at it and maybe you'll get your license before he returns. Upon reaching home, Nancy sketched an air map of the Heath Castle grounds. The next day she showed it to George and Bess, proposing that they start at once for the estate. Packing a picnic lunch, the three girls set out in Nancy's car. This time they dressed more appropriately for the trip by wearing riding breeches and stout boots. On the way, Nancy explained that the latest developments in the mystery. Nothing must drive us away from the estate until we've investigated every nook and corner of it, she declared as the car rocked over the bumpy road. I'm sure we can find a clue there. Directly ahead loomed the familiar ivy-covered boundary wall. Nancy parked the automobile beneath a cool tunnel of overhanging tree limbs. Leaping out, the girls walked to the rusty gate. There they stopped short, staring in dismay. Tacked to the barrier was a freshly painted sign which read, "No trespassing, under penalty of the law." And that is the end of our chapter.